Danny Boyle, did you get to like the Steve Jobs that you created in the film?
He's not my hero, no, I've got to be absolutely honest. I mean, he's an astonishing man, a challenging, complex, contradictory man. And his influence on our lives is like, it's impossible not to make films, not to tell stories about these people. No, my heroes actually are, there's a couple of other people in that world who took a different route. The Wikipedia, that actually said this knowledge is for everyone. This is for everyone, and we won't monetize it. Beyond the kind of circumstances of having to actually make the thing work. It's not. So it's that and Tim Berners-Lee, actually, who we featured in the Olympic opening ceremony, and who was partly responsible for the introduction of the World Wide Web and for making sure that it could not be owned by corporations. That actually this power that was being unleashed and in the blink of an eye historically has been done so over the last 30 years should actually be available to the whole world, because it was almost as important as oxygen. It was something that we were all going to depend on and need, and therefore it should not be in the hands of corporations necessarily. Not that they don't do a great job in other elements of it, so those are my kind of heroes.
But your Steve Jobs has come out, I think a lot of people think, as quite a jerk, actually, quite unpleasant. Is that? I mean, that. I think
that's unfair. I think Michael's portrait of him is uncompromising, and what's extraordinary about his performance as well, and obviously Aaron Sorkin's writing of it, was that you were not shielded from the extremes of his character, and there are many people who would testify to great devotion to him and to huge inspiration that they gained from him, and other people who felt they were very damaged, and it tries to. Somehow Michael manages to encompass both those elements really in a way. So it's an uncompromising portrait of a contradictory and difficult man. Yeah.
The line of the film, for me, that encapsulated the theme of the film was it's said by Steve Wozniak. And it's something like you can be decent and gifted. It's not binary.
Yes.
I mean, can you be decent and gifted, or basically maybe to be a Steve Jobs, you just do have to be a bit of shouty and a bit uncompromising and a bit horrible to your staff. That's how you get things done. You break some eggs in order to create that omelette. That's
one of the ideas, isn't it? And it's encouraged often by the media because it makes good media content, those kind of stories, and it makes good mythology as well, I think. And Jobs, certainly one of the things he was brilliant at was storytelling, myth making, really. And I think he probably, who knows, but he encouraged that side of it in effect. He didn't try to make himself likable or anything like that, because he was encouraging this other idea, which is there's this very exclusive bunch of people, the A team, who could develop the greatest products, really, as he saw it. Was, of course,
Steve Wozniak.
As you quote, as Seth Rogen quotes in the film, says, no, it's not binary. You can be decent and gifted at the same time.
But can you? This is my question to you. Can you be decent? I don't know. Can you?
I think you can. Yeah, I think you. I genuinely believe you can. There are many, many ways to go about your work, and some of them to motivate people. And Steve was a motivator, an inspire. He had a vision, and he was an inspirer, really, of people towards that vision. As he said elsewhere in the film, he doesn't appear to have any particularly sophisticated skills, certainly not in terms of coding, engineering, designing. He doesn't actually do much of it himself. He can't. But he synthesizes those who can to work towards this vision. And so there are many, many different ways of inspiring people. And sometimes it's fear, and sometimes it's intolerance, and sometimes it's actually appreciation. And that's Steve Wozniak's argument in it, that he's standing on the shoulders of giants, that you didn't just appear out of the blue like a messiah, like a virgin birth. There is a way that you arrived here, and that's why we start the film with Arthur C. Clarke at the beginning of the film.
Yeah,
he was also a man who, because Steve would sometimes have you believe he was the only person in the world who saw this vision of a friendly computer. But actually there are many other people who actually, in some way, create some accumulation of this idea, and the idea accumulates and gathers power and eventually breaks as a wave that actually is available to us all.
What about you? Are you like a gifted, nice genius, or are you a bit of a shouter? You put together an opening ceremony for Olympic Games.
I had to do a little bit of shouting with the International Olympic Committee, but anybody, no matter what kind of person you would shout at the International Olympic Committee at some point. No, I like encouraging the best of people. I find that I've always found that you get the best out of them from that. Occasionally, you need to be very tough about something.
You need to show that you care by occasionally shouting and saying to people, look, it matters, no?
Yes, it does. It doesn't have to be... I wouldn't shout very much. I've shouted only a couple of times, really. But I believe that you can bring people to the best, bring the best out of people through... They say with film directors that there's a low animal cunning goes on as well, no matter what your approach, that actually you're often there are things that you're after that you'll do anything to get at, and there needs to be many differentiations of the way you get them from people. But I believe in an honesty. I try to be honest with people, and that, I think that does bring the best out of them.
You will know, obviously, one of the things the film has attracted is a bit of an argument about how far a movie about a real guy can bend the facts and take dramatic licenses in order to make a great narrative. I mean, I'm interested that it has provoked so much criticism, because it's not hardly the first film to kind of introduce some story elements that maybe were fictitious in a factual film. I mean, where do you start thinking about historic Hollywood dramas that have changed the facts? But just as someone who makes the films, what are the rules about how far you can go in bending history?
I think it comes partly out of a despair at how unreliable facts are. Because when you actually research, I don't know how you guys do your job, when you research them, you know, they vanish in your hands. They literally desiccate in front of you because you ask somebody else about them and it changes. And so what you end up developing, if you're dealing with real life, is you end up developing a sense, and listen, this is not going to stand up in a court of law, but it's the bullshit sense where you go, it's the bullshit detector that goes, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. And one of the greatest directors ever, Stanley Kubrick, used to refer to it as that you trust the feel of it, not the think of it. And when you put it through, and I know it sounds, everybody will just go, oh, yeah, but this is the facts. You don't contradict the facts. You don't actually say Steve Jobs is an alcoholic or anything ridiculous like that. So you're not introducing facts or evidence, supposed evidence that's ridiculous. So you're not being disrespectful like that. But you actually put it through various filters. The bullshit detector filter on Aaron Sorkin, on me, and then all these actors, especially these actors. You get that nightmare with actors where they go, I don't think my character would behave quite like this at this moment, which fills you with, it's horror moment for a film director. You think, oh, how long are we going to be here? But actually it's very important because it's an internal moral sense that you think we are being honest here and respectful. This is not a hatchet job. This is not a deification. We're trying to find a way through people's opinions of him, which are expressed as evidence to Aaron Sorkin when he first did the research, meeting all these people he knew.
But as the director, are you trying to portray the character? There's an aspect of his character, let's say his temper tantrums. Are you trying to be accurate, or are you trying to be dramatic? Or are you trying to blend the two, or be as dramatic as you can within a certain distance of the accurate? I mean,
yes, that's a pretty good way of putting it.
Sort of constrained drama, so it can't go too far away from what you really believe the case to be.
You're trying to create a kind of reality, and this is really hard actually, that is as intense as reality itself is, but it isn't reality. It's a kind of version of it, because you know you've all bought into the conceit that you're in an artificial space, sat with 200 strangers who you will never speak to, all emotionally losing yourself in a story. That's highly artificial concept, really. And I like the fact that within our conceit there's an abstraction which is itself artificial. Yeah. The same 6 people don't meet and go through these scenes 40 minutes before the launch on 3 separate occasions, and part of your consciousness knows that, but you're still, your own bullshit detector is at work as well.
Have you been annoyed at the argument that's raged around the accuracy, the historical accuracy?
Well, it's funny actually, because no, I think it's actually one of the reasons that I did the film, because I think that a corporation like Apple is so powerful now, so influential around the world, that it's crucial that writers and artists tell the stories that they don't necessarily want you to tell. I don't mean that you're kind of digging out stuff about them that's unacceptable behaviour-wise or anything like that. That's a journalist's job. But you actually do tell stories about some of the fundamentals of the company, and in this case, one of the co-founders of the company, so that you begin to understand how it has happened that this company that was born in a garage 40 years ago, it dominates the world now and is richer than virtually all countries on earth, apart from a few dozen. You
don't want them to just write the history. You want other people to have a go at their history as well. Otherwise, it's too corporate.
And particularly with a character who, on the one hand, is unleashing unbelievable power. As he says, suppose this power was in everyone's hands. That's what he imagines. He's giving this unbelievable world power to each individual. Suppose it was in each person's hands on the one hand, and that's very admirable, you think, and you think about its influence around the world, the way it's influenced even migrants now, refugees are obviously learning from their mobile phones the state of the world so that they can literally change route to actually try and get to where they need to get to. So on the one hand it's wonderful, and on the other hand, as an individual, psychologically, he wanted total control over that power. It's said in the film he wanted end-to-end control of those products. And Apple does still, in a way, as that's part of the nature of the company. So you go, okay, that in itself is enough material for us to investigate, for you to investigate as storytellers.
Do you feel like a Hollywood insider now? You won an Oscar, Slumdog Millionaire, but you're kind of like an independent filmmaker, really, aren't you? You're a Hollywood person now?
No, we're not really. This is the first script I've ever done that we didn't generate ourselves, really, here in Britain. And this came from, and actually we were grieving over a project of ours that had failed to make it to the starting line for various reasons, and this arrived, and it was kind of pretty much, I just finished reading a great book which I could recommend, the Dave Eggers book, The Circle. I just finished that, just nothing to do with movies, just out of pleasure. I love his writing, and what he investigates in there, what he explores, is this company like Apple, Google, Elon Musk, all of them wrapped up together 10 years hence, and this seemingly benign influence on our world and what it could mean. Anyway, I just finished that, and this felt like part of that same conversation in a way, albeit through a very personal prism rather than a kind of geopolitical prism.
But you're not a corporate sort of person. It's actually come through in this interview. And I mean, do you love Hollywood? Do you think Hollywood is great, or are you someone who kind of...
I never really got California at all, actually. I loved New York, and so I'm not anti-American, but I never got the Californian thing. But then we made this film, and we lived in San Francisco to make the film, and I kind of understood, really. It's an extraordinary town. And I come from Manchester originally, which had a lot to do with the first Industrial Revolution. And it's weird working in a town that is a modern Industrial Revolution, like the updated version of it. You got a sense of potential and of how things are changing, literally overnight. Things are changing in front of you. This power that's being generated from this weird mixture of hippies and business minds, this freedom and discipline coming together to create these kind of products that are now literally in everyone's hands.
It is incredible. It's 3 years since the Olympic opening ceremony now, probably 5 years since you started thinking about the Olympic opening ceremony. What an interesting couple of years it's been for the country. I mean, at the time, everyone said Danny Boyle produced a statement of our country that most people thought, this is rather good, we're proud of this, and it was a sort of statement of a modern nation at ease with itself. Since then, Scotland has virtually left the UK, a referendum on the EU, we've had a huge debate over migrants and whether we should have any more coming here. The NHS, we're reading every day about junior doctors or hospitals that are, struggling to balance the books. I just wonder what you think about the state of Britain since you produced that. I'm not incidentally blaming you for any of the developments that occurred since the Olympic opening ceremony. It's just been a really interesting 3 years for Britain, hasn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a vibrant nation. I mean, it's like it continues to earn its place in the world, really. I personally think a lot of that is to do with culture. I personally think a lot of that's to do, other people argue it's to do with business or banking or whatever. I think that, I think that what's happened since, if you kind of want to, is that basically what's taken over is usually what concerns us, and why the Olympic opening ceremony was different is it was a chance to stop and actually just look at ourselves, because we're so self-critical normally. We're always in a state of total self-criticism, on many sides about how we work. We have a separated parliamentary system that reflects that. You know, without a single cohesive figure in the way that the Americans have the president, our Queen is very much separate from the process. So it feels that the arguments always flow backward and forwards like that, the sense of criticism. And the media feeds off that. You know, that's what we get we digest our daily news through that prism, really. And the Olympic opening ceremony was a chance to say, behind that, there's a sense of a progressive, decent country that lies there for all of us, and we can encourage it, which I think is all you can do. And one of the things that was interesting about it, although that was a philosophy we took going into the job like 5 years ago, meeting all the people who came to this country to help the ceremony happen, you know, and the games that followed it, they did all look to us. They don't look to that daily divisive stuff that we concentrate on. They look to our core values, which they see as estimable, really genuinely. They look at us as somewhere, if you want to be free and you want to contribute something, you come here. They really, I mean, that was wonderful, actually.
And has there been any dent in your view of Britain as a country which is free and which has these core values? I mean, the debate over migrants this summer, for example, have you watched that with horror or with an open mind, or?
I think any hesitancy about resisting refugees coming to this country just denies the very nature of what the country's built on. I mean, you know, we've always had a noble tradition of being a refuge for people who, for whatever reason, are under threat. And I think that's part of our national identity, what makes us a great country, really. And on the day-to-day politics of it, there's fear and kind of worry and economic concerns and all that kind of stuff. But there's a core value that actually, and that's what I mean, you can encourage that. You can encourage those core values. Sometimes you just bring them to the fore when necessary, when they need to be brought to the fore.
It's been very volatile politically, obviously, for the last few years. I'm culminating in Jeremy Corbyn being elected leader of the Labour Party. None of us remotely predicted it, 100 to 1, not even close. Are you filled with the joy of a new politics, or are you filled with the horror of a man who you don't think can win the next election? I mean, which of the various narratives about Jeremy Corbyn which one did
Should
you
we do a
take?
biopic of Jeremy Corbyn? No. He's obviously a very admirable man, and I admire his, you know, the way that he has maintained his own personal principles throughout his time, which he clearly has done. Obviously, your only concern is that in the sway of things, by the time the back and forth has finished and you arrive at an election where you actually have to make absolute decisions, is will the Labour Party remain a proper force that can be a government, really? That's the only thing that you ever worry about. It's important for it to have elements of protest, but it's not a protest movement. It's something that's been in government and has changed lives of people and changed the shape of the country. And that ability to be electable is crucial, and I just hope it remains so, really.
What's next? Trainspotting 2?
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about it?
Yes, I can, actually. It's just like, I probably should tease you, but no, it's like, no, seriously, we have an amazing script by John Hodge, who wrote the original adaptation of the original book, Trainspotting, and we have a new script, which we're going to try and call T2, but we think James Cameron may have problems with that because which he'll stop because of Terminator and Terminator 2 and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to ask him. But it's and it takes place 20 years after the first film, which is actually, as it happens, next year. And
dark or light? Is it?
Its tone has got a great sense of humour, and it's about friendship, really. It's about the four of them, and circumstances bring them all back together again. And we see what happens to them. And it's interesting, the actors who've all agreed to do it now, they were very hesitant, as I was at first, that if it wasn't as interesting as the original film, we would disappoint people, and they would rightly accuse us of going back for monetary reasons or whatever, for just trying to. But it's not that. I think they've all been surprised at the opportunity the script's going to provide for everyone to have a look at what 20 years has done to them, and what they've made of themselves and what lies before them as well.
We look forward to it. Danny Boyle, thanks very much.
Thanks, Evan.